Greetings and welcome to the United States Transhumanist Party Virtual Enlightenment Salon. My name is Gennady Stolyarov II, and I am the chairman of the U.S. Transhumanist Party. Here we hold conversations with some of the world's leading thinkers in longevity, science, technology, philosophy, and politics. Like the philosophers of the Age of Enlightenment, we aim to connect every field of human endeavor and arrive at new insights to achieve longer lives, greater rationality, and the progress of our civilization.
Hey there, everybody. It's Crazy John Kerecz, and I'm here again with Gennady Stolyarov II, and we've interviewed him plenty of times. So he is the chairman of the Transhumanist Party, the United States Transhumanist Party. And tonight we said we'd do a follow-up after the election. So we're doing a follow-up of, how things are going and what both our thoughts are on how many days are we into it now? Do you know the exact count?
Well, the inauguration was on January 21st. We are recording this on March 21st, so we're 2 months in.
2 months in, yeah. And it has been an interesting ride so far. My initial thoughts were he was going to do a bunch of stuff, just to say he did a bunch of stuff in the first 100 days, and then it would probably slow down. And I think it seems to have slowed down a little bit. I don't know what your thoughts are, but I think it's slowed down a little.
Well, there has been quite an onslaught, and it does seem like the country is still working through the implications of the first wave of actions of the Trump administration, if one could call it that, because it has been more of a continuous set of activities on multiple fronts. And I think the difficulty is in keeping track of it all because it is so spread out. One could look at DOGE, the so-called Department of Government Efficiency. One could look at some of the activities with regard to, let's say, Trump's political opponents, with regard to mass deportations, with regard to foreign policy, with regard to trade wars, tariffs, some tariffs that are announced that are implemented and then withdrawn or delayed. And all of that creates a kind of overall nebulous impression. One isn't sure exactly what is happening or whether there's an overall design to it or whether it's more of a scattershot approach or an approach of throwing a bunch of things at the metaphorical wall and seeing what sticks. So with that being said, I did not expect that pace of activity because I am more used to what happened during Trump's first term, where there was very early on a set of measures like the travel ban for visitors from multiple countries, but that got overturned very quickly, and the Trump administration's activities got blocked by the courts very quickly during the first term, and then the Trump administration took a more incremental approach. And so far, I'm not seeing the Trump administration taking that incremental approach. There have been some court orders, there have been some lawsuits, but it seems that a lot of these activities are proceeding at a pace, sometimes in defiance of the court orders or in ways that get around Congress altogether, even when Congress is supposed to be making certain decisions, like the decision of whether or not to allocate funding or to cut a particular agency. That is not an action that the president is able to do unilaterally.
Okay, what do you think of Elon Musk with his DOGE and cutting things out, and the fact that some of the numbers they've come up with didn't seem to be actual numbers? Or let's not forget the transsexual mice.
Right. Which are actually transgenic mice. It has nothing to do with gender. but they just completely misunderstood it at a basic level. And my issue with Doge primarily is in regard to how haphazard, indiscriminate, and unintelligent it is. There is some waste at the federal level. The infamous $750 toilet seats on aircraft carriers were uncovered as early as the 1980s, and there has been similar wasteful spending. But the wasteful spending does not, in its vast majority, occur because of federal employee salaries. Federal employee salaries are around 3 to 4% of the federal budget. What is actually wasteful are some of the contracts to politically connected corporations, and those contracts are the ones that drive up the costs of a lot of the goods or services that the federal government is purchasing. But Doge isn't really focused on cutting or studying those contracts. Indeed, the way to really achieve government efficiency and to reduce wasteful functions would be to study each activity in detail, to try to gather data, to try to interview people who actually know what is happening and figure out which expenditures are worthwhile and which could be reduced or which could be replaced with something else. But if there are these massive headcount reductions that often make no distinction on the basis of what the employee in question actually does or what the individual employee's performance was, sometimes they were made based on the probationary status of that employee. So recently hired or recently promoted employees were terminated. And sometimes there's a directive for an agency-wide reduction of force. So a particular agency could be instructed to cut X% of staff. That is not going to be helpful because often those numbers of staff are needed for the agency to perform its essential functions, the functions for which that agency was created. And if you cut the staff, what you're going to get is dysfunction. You're going to get inefficiency. You're going to get a situation where the government indeed is unable to deliver on whatever promises or whatever roles it was supposed to perform. And then the critics are going to come in and say, well, this agency is failing, but that wasn't necessarily a foregone conclusion. Perhaps the agency starts to fail because it doesn't have sufficient staff, it doesn't have sufficient resources. We spoke during our last interview of what often happens in those situations when there are not enough employees, then the gaps get plugged metaphorically using contractors, and contractors tend to be more expensive. Also, contract firms could have their own agendas. And as a result, maybe the job gets done, but it might not get done as well, and it gets done more expensively. So not having salaried employees could be costlier to an agency. And again, I see a great problem with the executive branch making these decisions unilaterally, bypassing Congress, because it is the job of Congress to decide which agencies should exist and should get funded. That's a legislative function. And the executive branch enforces the laws. The executive branch does not get to unilaterally legislate. And even in a situation where I would agree that something should be cut or something should be reformed, I would want that to be done through the proper channels to respect the separation of powers.
It was interesting, some of the things you said. I used to work for the federal government for a while. I'm retired from the state government, as you know. But I mean, I saw things where, people talk about the $700 toilet seat. And I saw an example in my office where actually the policy was written to help the small mom and pop store. We were not allowed to buy from say Sears. Sears is the exact example I want to use because we needed a heat gun. We were doing a chemical experiment. We had to heat up material that was similar to cat litter that grabbed the tritium and had to get it heated quick to release it. You need a heat gun. So the same heat gun we paid over $100 for, you could go to Sears and pay $29 for. But the way our stuff was written, we could not order or go down to a big store and buy it. We had to buy from a mom and pop store because we were supporting mom and pop America and their businesses. Now, what came into it is mom and pop were the ones really ripping off the government because they knew the government had to buy from them, and they quadrupled the price of the heat gun. And it was the exact same heat gun. And I looked at it. It was the exact same heat gun. And so, I realized that the program that the federal government had put into place was actually to try to help the mom pop, not hinder them. But then the mom pop took advantage of it. And I mean, they unbelievably took advantage of it. And it's like, I myself feel they probably thought, oh, it's the government money. But that comes back around. I mean, that's what people sometimes don't realize. And sometimes contracts, like you said, contractors. I worked for the state in permitting, and we had grant programs that were funded by federal money. And some of the engineering firms, we would joke that we knew certain ones that were going to design the plants that they were building. And we joked that they would put in gold flagpoles and gold handrails. Now, they did overbuild. But what that got me, though, as an engineer and stuff, is the stuff they built worked because they did overbuild it. A lot of times you see where they nickel and dime things and then it doesn't work. So although realized they were taking advantage of the grant program, they were actually building a better quality product that some of the other people that were nickel and dime it didn't. So it's interesting how some of the programs they set up, the government isn't trying to abuse their money or waste their money. They're actually trying to help the small person, the small company. And it's sometimes the people trying to they think of the government as a gold mine, and that's sad to me too. But then the same people probably turn around and say how the government is wasteful. So I mean, it's a slippery slope. There's more than one side to everything, and that's the difficult part. Also, and like you said, programs. And the other thing I've seen a lot of times in government, you say, they might be understaffed to begin with. A lot of times I'll see somebody come in new, and we're in a new administration, and they have all these great new ideas, and they supposedly implement them. I'm going to say supposedly, and they are supposedly working really well, and they go off somewhere else. I mean, you can't go much higher than being the president of the United States, but in other companies and in governments, they get promoted somewhere else and they leave. And then these programs don't work. Well, to be honest with you, the programs never worked. And then the people that had envisioned them in the first place, their excuse is the fact that, well, the people that are there now aren't properly implementing it. It's not the concept of my program. It's the people now aren't really implementing it. And I've seen so much of that. And that goes on a lot too. And that causes, I think, a lot of waste and a lot of issues in the government. But I'm just talking about things I've seen. I do think it's scary when people are getting laid off in large numbers because I think it's a contradiction where you want people to have jobs by merit. And then I'm not sure that by merit qualifications is how you're getting rid of them. That's my concern there. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Right. I think that there is a significant element of this that follows the Project 2025 scheme, let's say, of trying to replace career civil servants with partisan loyalists. So this was written about in the Project 2025 Master Handbook, the so-called Mandate for Leadership, and the goal is essentially to create a civil service that is loyal to the administration in power more so than being an objective cadre of what the Project 2025 architects would call technocrats, but they don't like so-called technocrats because technocrats are not political, at least they don't have to be. And technocrats essentially function according to the logic of the position or the logic of the job or a certain technical skill set. And whether a Republican or a Democrat or somebody else is in power, they do roughly the same job. Of course, sometimes the legislature, Congress, or the president may have certain priorities, and government agencies do adjust through various layers of appointed officials. But the civil service is intended to be insulated from that. And Project 2025 seeks to undo that and seeks to essentially sweep away a vast number of positions that the architects of Project 2025 think might resist some sort of political push from the presidential administration. Now, what's also interesting is this approach of suddenly sweeping away vast numbers of people as well as significant government functions is not an approach that is endorsed even by some, let's say, staunch free market advocates. So one of my favorite thinkers is Ayn Rand, who very much was in favor of laissez-faire capitalism, free markets, and a reduced role for government and economic activity. But in 1962, she was asked essentially what changes would she institute if she were elected president tomorrow. And I'd like to read her response because I think it is highly informative of what a much more rational approach would look like. These are her words, so I will say this is her perspective, but compare and contrast it with what Elon Musk and Doge are doing. So Ayn Rand was asked, if you were elected president of the United States tomorrow, what changes would you institute? And she responded, this is the last thing I'd attempt or advise anyone to try. But to the hypothetical question, what would I advocate if my advice were immediately put into effect? I'd answer, start decontrolling the economy as fast as rational economic considerations permit. I speak of rational economic considerations because today every part of the population is dependent on government controls. Most professions have to function under controls, and their activities are calculated on that basis. So if anyone were to repeal all controls overnight by legislative fiat, that would be a disastrous, arbitrary, dictatorial action. What a free country needs is to give all the people concerned sufficient notice to readjust and reorganize their economic activities. Therefore, after working out with economists the kind of program necessary to decontrol the country and what controls should be repealed first, I would then advise passing legislation announcing that certain controls will be abolished within 3 years, say, the period calculated to allow people the opportunity to readjust their activities. In a free economy, no change happens out of the blue and overnight. Every economic change, every development is gradual. Therefore, in a free society, there are no immediate and disastrous changes. But given our present situation, any sudden changes could create disastrous dislocations, and so we should decontrol gradually. And I note she said this in 1962, so this was before even Lyndon Johnson's Great Society programs, before a lot of the agencies that were created under Richard Nixon and Jimmy Carter and George W. Bush. So all of this was premised on a federal government that at the time was much smaller and did a lot less than the federal government does today. But her main point is that when you have a system of controls and regulations in place, people begin to depend on them. Their activities, their economic calculations, their long-term plans have adjusted to them. And you don't want to shock them out of it because that will create a lot of disruption. So she's saying the goal for her is to decontrol all of that. And maybe if she looked at Elon Musk's activities today and the activities of Doge, she might agree with some of the end goals, but she would disagree with doing it so quickly. And she would disagree with doing it without a plan and without considering what should be repealed first. What is the proper sequence of actions? So I think that's a much more measured perspective. And of course, it requires a long-term time horizon that could extend for years and maybe decades. And perhaps what is happening is Donald Trump and Elon Musk don't think they have that long of a time period. They think they have a very short window in which to act. And if they don't act now, they won't get another chance, maybe because their opponents will rally and stop them somewhat, or they'll lose the midterm elections and they'll have a divided government starting in early 2027.
That's a good possibility, I think, because I think everybody's getting surprised. I have some thoughts on what you said. One thing is, talking about civil servants and stuff, it sounds to me like a return to the old days and not even that long ago. I have to admit, probably have about close to 44 years of government experience, local and federal, and then my 35 with the state. But I've seen and I've had friends whose fathers worked for the government. And in the old days, they would purposely register as independent because they did not want to be on the books as being either Democrat or Republican because of what would happen when the governor would change or another politician that had an effect on them would change, because it could come down to their jobs that they could be cleaned out of their offices because of not being in the proper party. So to me, that kind of reminds me of like a go back to the old days, not a plus, but a backward step in a way where people have to be worried about that. And the other thing I was thinking of too was a lot of times I've seen when they go through and they change a lot of programs or get rid of a lot of programs too quickly, a lot of times they make screw ups. I don't know what better way to put that there. And they realize, oh, we have to do something because now this isn't covered there, that isn't covered. And sometimes that's spinning their wheels to recover their behinds because there's new problems they've caused by getting rid of some of this stuff. And in the long run, sometimes that costs more money than what they saved in the first place. Although they can still go on the books as saying, we did all these changes. Okay, you implemented that change, which cut this and this, but then you had to implement this and this to make up for the fact that you cut that and that. And really, how did that really save anything? A lot of times I would say smoke and mirrors. A lot of things can be smoke and mirrors that the government does, and they throw something out there and say, this is great, while at the same time, something else is happening. And I think Trump's like that. I think Trump and Elon are going to save money on this stuff, but then I think they're probably going to waste money somewhere else and make it sound like it's the best thing,
Yes. I don't think they're going to have net savings because the fallout of all of these sudden cuts is going to be such that crises are going to be created. Elon did at least briefly fire air traffic controllers, people in charge of the nuclear weapons stockpile, people who were administering the US response to Ebola. And I think once this was discovered, Elon himself realized, oh, it wasn't a good idea to fire these people, but the chaos had already been created. So it was even the case that not all of these people got their jobs back right away after they were terminated and the mistakes were admitted, because the machinery of terminating them and dislodging them from their positions had already been set into motion. And one aspect of bureaucratic machinery is once you set it in motion, it's difficult to stop it. It's not like a switch that you can flip on or off. There are many moving parts to it. And so that inertia of the system, it could work to perpetuate the system, or it could work to disrupt the system. And once the disrupting mechanisms have been set in motion, they can't just be stopped because a high-ranking official wants them to stop. And that's something Elon doesn't realize yet. And maybe he will refine his approach to some extent, but one aspect of his personality is that he likes to shoot from the hip, metaphorically speaking, and he keeps doing it. So what is more likely is he will move on to other things, other areas in which he can shoot from the hip, and then maybe some other members of the administration will try to clean up the mess. There was already a fairly well-publicized meeting between Trump, Musk, and the various cabinet secretaries, where many of the cabinet secretaries were expressing frustration at Elon, for instance, for cutting USAID, which is under the purview of the State Department. So Marco Rubio was upset with Elon Musk for essentially shutting down one of his agencies without really consulting or involving him.
Yeah, it is interesting. I feel like sometimes Trump is just going, oops, oops, I made a mistake. And he even said, oh, I'm going to make some mistakes, but we'll try to correct them as soon as possible. But what happens then is I think they diffuse it by saying, yeah, but we're trying to do something good here. We're trying to get rid of all this corruption. And did you realize how many 300-year-olds were getting Social Security? I mean, they deflect it that way. And then people are like, oh, yeah, he made a mistake, but they're trying to cut corruption. And I think the thing is that the people that are saying that's okay are the people that aren't being affected.
Right.
Or they don't realize they're being affected yet. When you deal with the public and you work for the government, they hate you. The public hates you until they need you. And when they need you, then they want you to do all sorts of amazing things for them while you're standing on your head and humming the national anthem, while who knows what else, saying the rosary at the same time or whatever. But when they need you, they love you until you don't do exactly what they want, and then they hate you again. And, that's the issue, too. So when, they're taking pot shots at this corruption, a lot of people are like, oh, well, government employees, they're lazy, they're this or that. All right. We both know there is some of that. There is some of that. But then you also have a lot of hard workers in the government also. I mean, my joke always is, if you work and you do good work, you get rewarded with more work. So you will sometimes have the slackers in government like you do in any job. And that makes more work for the workers. But there is a lot of workers out there in the government, and there's a lot of people in government that take their jobs very seriously. I mean, there's some people I think that take their jobs more seriously than they should even. But I mean, there are people that do. And I think people don't always realize that because it's that love-hate thing people have with the government. I used to drive around in a federal vehicle when I worked for EPA, and you'd go out to check some of our equipment that was watching TMI, because we were monitoring TMI, the radiation after the accident. And some of them were scared or would get their gun just because they saw a vehicle that said U.S. Federal EPA office on it and stuff. And it's like, but that's interesting to me, too, because farmers kind of complain about the government, but yet they get money from the government. And I've known farmers that told me how they purposely grew things to get money from both. Like they'd plant corn in between like cherry trees so they could get money like the next year if there's too much corn not to plant corn, and they would purposely do this banking on how much money they'd get from the government. So it's an interesting love-hate relationship that I think our citizens have with government employees. And I don't think they really appreciate you until they need you. And I don't think they really think you're worth it until they need you, because there's a lot of things that go on that people don't understand the usefulness of it. And that's another important thing. Does Elon understand all the reasons that these things came into effect? Why is that there? Why are there people that are supposed to be doing that? And like you said, I don't know if you exactly said that, but I mean, I don't know if he put enough evaluation into it to really understand the intricate workings to know what he's destroying and why it was there in the first place.
Right. He's certainly no economic scholar and no scholar of political science. He might see a few things that outrage and upset him, and he thinks he has the ability to affect the situation because he has wealth, he has political influence now, he has people who are able to do his bidding, but he doesn't study the long-term history or implications of the work of a particular government agency. And again, if there were a serious concerted effort to study what a particular agency does, what the programs actually are, what the effects are, whether that's necessary, what the cost benefit analysis is, I think that would be reasonable to undertake. But it would take years to do a thorough job. And I think Elon doesn't want it to take years. I think he wants it to take days. And this is where he's running up against resistance even from within the Trump administration. I do believe this approach is unsustainable because ultimately you can only go so far and antagonize so many people before there's a critical mass of people who say, this is enough. We are not going to accept this anymore. And the fact that so many of the employees that are being terminated right now are Republicans, or at least they would have been fairly neutral toward the Trump administration. They would have been willing to do jobs that, even though they themselves would have been neutral from a political standpoint, could have helped to bolster this administration because they would have kept things running in the background, thus creating fewer problems for the administration to deal with. Now these people have been alienated, and these people have been mobilized to some extent, because if one suffers some serious blow from a financial standpoint or even from a morale standpoint, and a morale blow is certainly likely to somebody who has been fired arbitrarily, they're going to notice this and they're going to try to do something about it. At the very least, they're going to vote in a different way. So I think Trump and Musk are creating their own opposition, even though at the start of Trump's second term, the so-called resistance was a lot lower key than it was during the start of the first term. And I think maybe they were emboldened by this. They thought, oh, this is our cue to enact a very sweeping series of changes. But in so doing, they are creating a new resistance, which I think may be stronger. And unfortunately, I think this resistance may be less civil than the first resistance, because we're already seeing acts of vandalism and sabotage, Tesla vehicles being set on fire or spray painted with graffiti. We didn't really see that the first time around. We saw some mass protests when the first Trump administration came into office. The vast majority of those protests were peaceful. People were wearing pink hats, holding up placards, and so forth. And I think that is a very legitimate form of resistance. But as you know, John, I take great exception to any violent actions, whether they be on the left or on the right. So I oppose the urban riots of 2020. I oppose the January 6th attack on the Capitol. And I'm opposed to these acts of vandalism and destruction against Tesla vehicles. I think many Tesla owners are not themselves political and they didn't purchase those vehicles because they approve of Elon Musk's politics, but they're being caught up in this frenzy of reaction to what Elon Musk is doing. And unfortunately, the only effect this is having is to radicalize and antagonize people on both sides of the current partisan divide. So that's very unfortunate. And I hope that some efforts to moderate and de escalate are going to be undertaken soon.
Well, I had a couple of things I was thinking, but one I'll throw out there first is it was interesting to me after one of the layoffs, somebody said something I'd read about him, Elon, saying that some of these positions could be handled with AI responses and stuff. And then I saw somebody say, now this is something close to the transhumanists. Somebody said something about, oh, maybe that'll actually bring the singularity upon us quicker. And I thought, well, that was an interesting twist there. You know, that something that seems so crazy could bring something else about. I don't know what your thoughts are on that comment that I had read. But
so, of course, the Transhumanist Party has taken a strong interest in the applications of AI, and we have used emerging AI systems ourselves, for instance, in creating art, music, even certain segments of our Virtual Enlightenment Salons where we have AI podcast hosts. And I myself have used various AI chat platforms, including ChatGPT, several generations of it, or Grok, Grok 2, Grok 3. And I think there are many applications where these AI systems could help people, but they only go so far. They can, for instance, answer questions using publicly available research or generally known information, but it's more difficult for an AI to understand the full context of an individual's situation because the AI relies on information that's broadly available to everyone, as well as perhaps the prompt that somebody puts in, which could have some information, but not the whole context of a person's life or the history of that person's work. So you could have AI chatbots or virtual assistants, AI avatars that guide people in certain directions. At least in terms of initial interactions, they could ask the first line of questions. They could provide some general information, and maybe even certain documents could be fed into those AIs and they could analyze them and give answers based on those documents. And these could be the documents that have been developed or published by that agency. What those AIs still cannot do is make the executive decisions with an understanding of a subject matter expert. And indeed, these AI large language models are prone to what are called hallucinations. Sometimes they seek to appear authoritative in all circumstances, but there are genuine gaps in their knowledge or what the available research shows, so they make things up. And I've seen these systems make up sources or conjure facts out of essentially correlations with existing information, but those are not real facts. They're just plausible seeming.
So
and
you're telling me that Trump is actually a faulty AI. Is that what Sorry.
That's a good one.
But yeah, I myself do use some AI. I use AI a lot for correcting stuff that I do. Or when you want something reworded that you don't quite like the way it's worded, But I find as far as coming up with ideas, the ideas and the direction, you need a human for that.
Right.
And with my music, some of it I don't like my voice, and I will alter my voice. Give the computer an idea, and it'll smooth it out and make it sound different, which is interesting to me because I find my songs that actually use my voice, which I think is horrible. Sometimes people seem to listen to more than the smoothed out computerized ones. But sometimes I think there's a pushback though too.
Yes, and I think that there remains a very strong role for humans in both creative and analytical functions. So an AI can be a powerful tool, and I think the most powerful outputs are going to be in cases where AIs and humans collaborate. And the AIs could also be creative in certain respects. They could recombine the inputs that they receive in ways that a human wouldn't think of. And they could point to intriguing new possibilities. But it does take a human to curate this material, to distinguish what is worthwhile from what might not be as valuable or what could be just something very ordinary that has been rehashed. Over the years, and it has only been a few years, but I've had enough exposure to be able to do this, I have learned to distinguish output that is written by a human from output that is written by an AI. Actually, I think the AI output adheres too rigidly to structures that people are commonly taught in their English classes. Like if you write an essay, write it with 5 paragraphs or so. And in the first paragraph, tell us what you're going to say. And in the last paragraph, tell us what you just said. But human communication is more fluid and flexible than that. And generally speaking, some of the answers that one gets when asking an AI system can become too repetitive because it does very often just keep summarizing what it just told you. And I think the systems are designed to view this as being thorough or being formal. But when humans say something, generally they'll say the substance once. And if they reemphasize it, they'll reemphasize it in the context of having said something else, introducing another thought. So the AI outputs, at least in writing, in nonfiction analytical writing, tend to be overly formulaic, in my view. Now, with art, it's a bit different. I actually see the creative side of AI generated art to be more interesting than the technical side. Because, for example, an AI system today, whether that be DALL-E or Grok or Flux or Midjourney, could create very interesting landscapes or cloudscapes. And it's getting better with cityscapes as well, or interiors. But with man-made objects, it seems that these AI systems, because of the way they generate their images, could have strange asymmetries or elements that just don't make sense from a functional standpoint. Like no human architect would have put this in a building. No human architect would have designed a lopsided window or a window that's fuzzy in one corner. But that's because of the way these images are generated. They're generated based on correlations. So if you have a rock that's jutting out in a slightly different place, that doesn't look odd because natural landscapes are like that all the time. There are processes that are essentially random that lead to these outcomes. whereas man-made structures are designed intentionally with a purpose in mind, and a human artist depicting them would understand that, whereas an AI system draws upon vast numbers of images within its source database and correlations among them, and it varies them a bit to make really new and different and distinctive images. So those images may have some interesting and very innovative elements in them, like the background behind me right now, but they may also have elements that just don't seem to have a purpose or a rationale to them, or seem to have some strange design aspects that no human would have ever put into them. Now, you mentioned the singularity, the technological singularity, and that would require the arrival of what's called artificial general intelligence. So systems that are able to cross various domains and learn autonomously within those domains. So an AGI, for instance, that started out playing chess would be able to learn how to drive an autonomous vehicle or do some entirely different activity from the one for which it was programmed. The current systems cannot do that. They're narrow AIs, so they're programmed within specific domains, and they could become very good at them, like creating images or writing text, but they're not going to spontaneously teach themselves to do something completely different. And there are many thinkers who are experts in AI who consider the large language model architecture to be inherently incapable of reaching AGI. That's just not something that is part of the potential for these models. So my inclination is to think that true AGI is still about 20 years away. I think Ray Kurzweil's date of 2045 is still a plausible time frame for the arrival of AGI. But right now, we are not close to that. And as a result, I think companies that are cutting large numbers of human workers, or government agencies that are doing the same and thinking that AI will just replace those roles, are deeply mistaken, because the AI systems still require humans to use them and apply judgment to them. And what I'm seeing throughout the economy, from manual labor jobs to the so-called white-collar professions, is a shortage of human workers. There are certain positions that could be very productive if you even had one person in them using AI, but for whatever reason, there is such a cost-cutting and headcount-cutting mentality that those positions get eliminated or they don't get filled. And as a result, very little gets done. And it doesn't matter what tools are out there if nobody is using those tools, or if you don't have somebody at the front desk willing or able to receive somebody who walks in or interact with them, or if you don't have somebody in a customer support role willing to answer questions past a certain point, you don't deliver the service. It's as simple as that. No matter how much AI there is, you still need some level of human staffing to deliver those services.
Yeah, I totally agree with that at the point we're at right now. And I liked what you said about the writing and stuff. I do like it to correct my writing. I think because of the fact you said that it makes it more formal, I have a habit of not only talking in run-ons, but writing in run-ons. I mean, it's horrible. I got to go back and, well, that could be at least 3 or 4 sentences, that one sentence I just did. But I think that's a habit. And I do my music videos with AI, and I love that you're not sure what it's going to do. I mean, I give it parameters of what I want, and sometimes it takes me maybe 5 tries with a video to kind of like what it did. Sometimes it'll do some really odd things. Like if you ever see my one on the Cedar Street Blues, that's actually about my parents' house, and they had one time it up to 24 cats, and they had a pool, and we used to watch TV and eat pizza. So there's pizza in it, there's TVs in it, there's cats in it, there's pools. But sometimes the kids are turning into cats, the cats are turning into kids. The pool is outside the house, and then it's inside the house. The cats are walking on water. The picture frames turn into TVs. The tables turn into TVs and turn it back into tables. And a pizza turns into a table. And it's kind of very like you feel like you fed the computer LSD. You know, it's a very interesting factor that I think it's definitely not thinking in the box because it doesn't know what a box is sometimes. And I think that's the interesting part of, like you say, the artwork, things that we don't think of. But then I'll admit I set the parameters for it. So I can tweak the parameters if I want. But sometimes I like leaving them kind of open just to see where it runs with it. And that is kind of interesting.
Yes. Sometimes I've given the AIs very broad and flexible prompts that were intended to test just one particular thing, whether it would comply with one particular aspect of its output. For instance, I gave DALL-E 3 the prompt to generate a landscape without politicians. So literally, any landscape that didn't have a politician in it would have complied with that prompt. And DALL-E 3 passed that particular test. It did not put any politicians in those landscapes. And the reason why I was asking it to do that was to test whether it understood negation. Because sometimes, especially early on, these systems would just focus on the presence of a term. And if you said, don't do X, the fact that X was present was interpreted by the system as actually a request to put X in there. So the earlier systems didn't really understand negation very well, but they have been improved to the point where you could tell them, create a landscape without politicians or without apple trees, and they would create something that complied with that constraint.
Now, something you made me think about, though, when you said about how they can't deviate real good is I've had some frustrating conversations with IRS employees. And during the IRS season, the tax season, they hire people because of the increased calls and stuff. And these people cannot think out of the box. They follow their programmed speech and questions. They could be replaced with an AI. Because to be honest with you, they do not vary out of their pre-done what they're supposed to say. And if you ask them something else, they have to go back to their pre-done thing because that's, and I think it's two things. They're told to do that. And the other thing is, I think a lot of them don't really understand their job to begin with because they don't have to. They just have to ask you those questions. They could be replaced. I mean, yes. I actually think AI would probably do a better job than some of them have done. But so that kind of, I'm kind of interested in that. And, you know, I thought it was interesting. You said I had to bring that up about the singularity. I didn't really think that was true either. But people go off about things sometimes. And I've loved the stories, too, where they say that Elon Musk's satellites are the beginning of Terminator, you know.
Yes, I think there is a lot of hype when a new technology gets released, and often the reality is more incremental and more mundane. But I agree with you. A human that only follows a script could be replaced by an AI, and the AI could provide a more interesting user experience because
friendlier too.
Yes, the AI could actually have more variation in how it responds. It could create a smoother response that acknowledges what the person is actually saying, but tries to steer the person toward the subject of conversation or what the AI is capable of doing. Like if a person seeks customer service, but for whatever reason types in, well, what do you think of the weather today? The AI system could actually say, well, I think the weather is nice or it's overcast or whatever based on the information it has access to. But then it could transition and say, well, on such a nice day or on such a gloomy day, what can I do to help you with X, your problem, whatever the situation may be? So there's more of an ability to do that for an AI system than for a human who is instructed to follow a rigid script. I think in some of those customer service positions, which aren't paid very well, by the way, people are just given scripts and they're given productivity targets. So you need to complete X number of calls every hour. And if you don't, then you're penalized for it. And there are some common issues. Here are some scripts to deal with those. And oh, you're not allowed to deviate from those scripts. That's above your pay grade. If somebody has a really challenging issue, you escalate it up to the manager. And in those cases, yes, that's frustrating to deal with because in the position of a customer, I would rather talk to somebody who knows how to address my particular issue right away. So somebody who would respond intelligently to what I actually said or typed in.
It's interesting about the script. I was just thinking, I'll get right back around in a second, but I'll just say this. I just sold one of our houses, and bought a condo in New Jersey by the beach. And I had Earthlink for internet, and I had Earthlink Unlimited. Well, every month they complained that I was going over my quota for data. And when you go over your quota, you get slowed down. Okay. I thought that was the idea. You were still allowed to use it. Well, after 10 months, they fired me. I feel they fired me. And the reason was because I was using too much data on my unlimited plan. And I'm like, hold a second. How do you use too much data on your unlimited plan? How can you call it an unlimited plan and then say I'm using too much data? But when I called up the woman, because it was funny, because they turned me off right after they actually had taken one of my payments. Yeah, you know how that goes. But when I got the woman, it was, of course, in a call center somewhere. And sometimes I feel bad for these people because you talk to them and you're pissed off. But they can only work within their script, offer you this, offer you that, tell you there's nothing they can do because it's always already been done and they have no power to do anything. And they don't. But they actually take the bunt, the most of your frustration, and there's nothing they can do. I mean, you might as well be talking to a system anyhow, but to me, it was just ridiculous in this day and age. I was using too much data on my unlimited plan.
Right.
Okay.
And the person who made that decision is probably in the C-suite somewhere, not directly handling consumer complaints, earning a much more sizable salary and making these decisions completely disconnected from either the experience of the customers or the experience of the people who receive those complaints. Moreover, the people on the front lines receiving those complaints can't readily communicate that information up the chain of command because let's say they're 5 or 6 layers removed from those executives. They can't just come up and talk to the executives directly and say, well, look, consumers are complaining about this. They would be fired for being impertinent. So they may be able to communicate to their immediate bosses, but each layer of middle management has the incentive to kind of embellish the picture or not communicate details that would frustrate their superiors. So the people in the C-suite are really insulated from what is happening on the ground, and they may encourage either explicitly or implicitly their subordinates to only give them good news or to give them a picture of the world that confirms their preconceived notions or validates their brilliant ideas for how to change company processes.
It's interesting you were saying that. I was thinking about that, that 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon. Now, just to let you know, I've met Kevin Bacon. So through you knowing me, you're already within 2 degrees of Kevin Bacon. But I feel that those people in that talk room, them nor their bosses are nowhere even within 7 degrees of any of those people that really make the decisions. They're out there in this call center, and this is their job to do, and they get paid to do it. And I have to tell you, though, I went to T-Mobile, and I'm not trying to advertise for either one. I liked Earthlink because I was with them when they first started under Sky Dayton. He was quite a visionary in his time, too, and he's still out there when he started that company years ago. So I was happy to be back with Earthlink. But now with T-Mobile, I'm using the same data, and you know what? They don't complain. Difference with Earthlink was that it was 5G, and I think they were buying their 5G like off of Verizon. And what I find is, I think when you are like the bastard stepchild, meaning that you're not getting your internet directly from the company that's actually supplying it, I think they treat you like the bastard stepchild. Like my phone's a Verizon. My sister gets Verizon through Walmart. Now she's still using the Verizon lines and stuff, but she doesn't get as good a service or as good a reply on things because she's removed, So I really wonder, although I'm perturbed at Earthlink, I actually think it's probably Verizon complaining because Earthlink was probably getting their 5G most definitely from Verizon. And Verizon's like, we don't want to keep giving you this for that, because it's more than we want to give you. But if it says it's unlimited, it should be unlimited. But let's get back to politics. Sorry about that. So what do you feel? Where do you think we're heading right now? I'll throw out there some of what I hear from you is, I guess this is my interpretation is, and my thinking too on kind of mixing it together. I think right now he's trying to do a whole bunch of stuff and get stuff done. I think there is a excitement to it and a rush because I think they might know that eventually they're going to get slowed down. And that's kind of what I think is going to happen. I think there's going to be, the oil is going to start getting thick and gooey and the gears aren't going to be flowing like they'd like them to be. And people are going to be throwing up more blockades to them. And I think they're going to be getting slowed down in things they're doing. I don't know. I think that's what you're thinking also. Is that what you're thinking?
Yes, I think this blitzkrieg effort, if one could call it that, on the part of the Trump administration is going to get bogged down. And there are already signs that this is going to happen. Various court rulings that block certain aspects of DOGE, for example, or resistance within the cabinet agencies themselves, resistance from Congress, because even a Republican-dominated Congress is going to want to have more of a role and to be consulted to a greater extent than has happened. And finally, resistance from the public. There are, of course, the ideological opponents of Trump and Musk who are already becoming quite a bit more vocal. But then there are, as I mentioned, all of the people whom these policies are going to adversely affect. And this doesn't just include the government employees who are laid off or people who can't get these government services now. This also includes all the people who are frustrated by tariffs. If tariffs start to raise the cost of living, then that is going to have an effect on public opinion. During our last interview, I commented on the reasons why, in my view, Trump won. Trump won because of prevailing frustrations with the high cost of living and the attribution of that situation to the mistakes of the Biden administration, whether or not the Biden administration could have actually done something differently to prevent the rise of costs of living is not as important as the political perception that was cultivated and that Trump was able to successfully engender in the minds of many people, which was that life was better under Trump up to 2019, at least, than it was under Biden. And so Trump was able to say, well, if you elect me, you can get back to that standard of living and that level of costs of living. And I think increasingly people are going to realize this is not going to happen because the tariffs are only going to raise the costs of living. Trump has done nothing to fundamentally alleviate the inflationary pressures within the economy. So over time, there's going to be resistance from every segment of society. And in part, that's accelerated by this very haphazard approach and this very rushed approach that Trump and Musk are undertaking. So Trump and Musk may be thinking they have to pursue this rushed approach to fit everything in before the resistance materializes. But what this actually has the effect of doing is making the resistance materialize more quickly than it would have otherwise. If Trump had kept a lower key presence and done some fundamental reforms, but done them slowly behind the scenes, they might not have even been noticed by the media or by the general public. But as things stand now, every single day, so many egregious things are being noticed that I don't see this continuing for many more months. I would say perhaps during the first 100 days, this kind of momentum could continue to some extent. But after that, so about 40 days from now or so, it will slow down significantly.
Well, what I see happening is, people, I saw somebody made comment online the other day, oh, you people should shut up about the price of eggs. Do you realize how much corruption and waste he's cleaning up? Look at this great job he's doing. And I thought, exactly, that's the diversion and the deflection is he's not helping with the prices, bringing the food down. It's going up, but he's deflecting it and diverting the attention by saying, oh, but I'm cleaning up all this corruption. Once we get all this corruption cleaned up, you're going to see how all this is so much better, and it's still because of Biden. So that's what I see. I see them doing the, don't watch what the one hand's doing because the other hand's doing something else. But the sad thing is people are seeming to fall for it. But like you said, which I think is a good example, some of the people they're firing and stuff might have been supporters that were in the government, and that's going to make, or family members of, and that can make more trouble for them. Because somebody made the point one time, I was on, we talked about that before, I still go on that program, I can't think what it is right now, where they have the chats and stuff. And somebody said, well, whose government been better under, Republican or Democrats, as far as a quality of life? And the guy said, well, that's not really what we should look at here. He says, actually, usually it's been the Democrats it's been better on, and the Republicans, other things have been better on traditionally in the past. But he made the point that Trump really is not a Republican. He's out there doing his own thing. And what we've talked about before is, earlier in the conversation I was having upstairs, somebody said Democrats and Republicans. I said, yeah, but the Republicans aren't what you think of as Republicans anymore, and the Democrats aren't what you think of Democrats anymore. It's become an interesting world, and we talked about this before. I do think they need more third parties, and they need to realize that the people at the top with the governments have kind of been getting into their own world. And I think they've been losing touch. And that's what they liked about Trump, is he seemed to have that, what's that old thing, kick butt and take names later kind of attitude that I think the average person kind of thought, oh, this is great. He's going to go in and, because I think that they have lost their touch with the common person. And some of the stuff he said, I think, resonated with them. And I think some of it still does, because they think, oh, now he actually really is cleaning up the swamp, And when he talked about the trade, the person that signed those last trade agreements really didn't know what he was doing. He was the one that signed those trade agreements, but he doesn't bring that up. It's interesting, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's interesting and sad how the people still will make excuses for him. And I hope people pay attention more and start to. I think if food and everything really does start increasing, I think that's gonna move the people. You know, if some of these people right now that are getting fired whine and go on and talk about it, I think some people are gonna say, oh, well, they're just spoiled elitist government employees. They probably have pension in multiple houses, and you know, they're going to make up things where they don't want to listen to those people. But I think when they're hit themselves with the cost of food and products, that'll make a difference. And last time when he tried to do that, there were some companies that went out of business because he did tariffs before some of them, because companies within this country couldn't get the products they needed to make their product. So they were screwed. You know, I mean, you got to think about that too, is there are things that we're not totally self-reliant in this country. A company might need something from another country. And if you're making all these tariffs, then that might cost them out of being able to be profitable in their own business and go out of business themselves. And I don't think that's always being thought of. Like years ago, Reagan did the tariffs for Harley Davidson. Okay, I don't know if that was early 80s. I don't remember when you were born. That's probably before you were born. But it was made that any motorcycle over 700 cc's in size was going to get tariffed a lot. So what the Japanese started doing was making motorcycles 700, not 750s anymore, but 700s. And they started making more of their big bikes in this country. So it did have, which would probably mean more, meaning they assembled them in this country, but it did make some jobs and some plants for Americans. And it did help Harley because then people were more willing to buy the bigger Harleys because the prices were more competitive with the Japanese bikes who were undercutting them. But now countries, the Europeans, the European Union is taxing things like Harley Davidsons and making it hard for Harley, who's just hanging on as it is. And some of their, you know, they've moved into doing European and other countries sales to help them, and they have a plant in India and one in Mexico too. And it's funny to me because Reagan tried to help them, but now these tariffs in countersuit are going to hurt a company that tariffs were made years ago to try and help. Mm-hmm. And it's just, I think we've talked about this before too. I don't think people study history as much as they should.
Yes, and history shows very clearly that tariffs do not work even in terms of their stated intentions of protecting domestic production for several reasons. First of all, domestic production often requires or relies upon foreign inputs, like manufacturers of cars in the United States may import materials or components. And if one puts tariffs on steel, well, that makes a key component of cars, tools, construction materials more expensive. And then if American consumers pay more because of the tariffs, of course they do, they have less purchasing power even to buy American-made goods. And then, as you mentioned, there will be the retaliatory tariffs that other countries will impose on American goods, making them more expensive. And as a result, even importers will be hurt by tariffs. So economists have recognized for over 2 centuries now that this kind of protectionist policy is counterproductive, and they preferred free trade, the liberalization of these kinds of restrictions, the removal of tariffs, even unilateral removal of tariffs. Their was a famous episode in mid 19th century British history where there was a campaign against the Corn Laws, which were import taxes on grain that actually made food prohibitively expensive to a lot of people in England and in Ireland as well. So Richard Cobden and John Bright organized the Anti-Corn Law League to ultimately lead to the unilateral repeal of these corn laws, which greatly helped the British economy and also then contributed to the arrival of an era of free trade where other countries began to lower or eliminate their tariffs as well. So, unfortunately, a lot of that is being undone now by the Trump administration, either because they use tariffs or the threat of tariffs as a kind of negotiating tactic, or they may genuinely believe that this is going to protect certain domestic industries, but in reality, it's going to have the opposite effect for a lot of industries and a lot of consumers, and other countries are going to follow suit. They, I think, are going to harm their own citizens with retaliatory tariffs as well. But once this vicious dynamic is unleashed, it's difficult to rein it back in unless there is a massive enlightenment that occurs among all of the countries involved and all of the key players.
This is interesting too. I have to laugh. I know. I think about the Boston Tea Party, about the taxation on tea, and I mean, didn't we learn that people will vote against that stuff eventually? But it's interesting to me. Just a quick side, and I'll get to wrapping this up. Then is today I still notice in Pennsylvania, tea is not taxed, and it's interesting to me that if you have a drink that's tea, it's not taxed. If you make it a tea and like a fruit drink mix, then it's taxed because it's no longer just tea. But they still don't tax tea here in Pennsylvania. And I thought, well, that's kind of funny because that's a holdover from the old days. That's still in the book somewhere, and they don't tax it. And it's kind of funny. You know, you could have a drink that's tea and like some other juice added to it, like half a juice, that gets taxed. With the pure, just the tea doesn't get taxed. And it's kind of interesting how they still hold to that because of that going on back in the days. And a lot of people probably don't even realize that. And it is kind of funny sometimes how some of these things stick around in the books and how they still happen. But you think we'd learn years ago that people don't like when you start doing that. But people don't pay enough attention to the past, like I said, to history. Right. They're just going to keep doing it and think they have some great new idea. I have to admit that is one plus to probably AI and stuff. I think as long as they have access to data, I think their ability to go back and analyze and different things. And I notice myself too with writing and having AI correct some stuff I write. Sometimes it'll surprise me and it'll refer back to something else I wrote. And it's like, oh, it remembered. You know what I mean? It was kind of interesting how it remembered something that I had written before and pulled it back up to me. And it's like, oh, that is kind of interesting. But I think that in that way, it could be better. But then again, the old saying of garbage in, garbage out. If man hasn't kept up to date or has gone back in and altered it themselves, like they say, history belongs to the victor. You know, they will change. People might change things. So I don't know. So, okay, we've talked for a while here, and I don't want to keep you too long. So in closing, what do you think we're at, and when would you like to get back together and see how things have happened? You mentioned 40 days, you think? So maybe we should get back together at the end of that and see how things are going.
Yes.
What message might you want in closing up today and thinking of where we're at right now? It's an interesting world. It's definitely not how I expect it to be going right now. I mean,
Indeed.
some things I think are interesting. Uh, I was not always sure about the excessive woke pushes and stuff, and I know he's fighting back against that. And there was something. Oh, making English the American language. I kind of like that, and I'll tell you why. I'm originally from Allentown. Well, I'm from Bethlehem and Allentown, Lehigh Valley. It's called considered. And when I lived there, uh, we had a large Middle Eastern subculture. But after I left, it got very Hispanic. Now, my grandfather was from Spain, but it's gotten very Hispanic. And there was a time when there was a push to try and make the language, the official language of Allentown, Spanish, and make the signs dual language. And their big support of that was that the country really had no official language. And so knowing that I've seen that happen in the past, and mind you, that could have been 20, 25 years ago already that happened. It's interesting to me to now finally make English the official language, because then people can't try and do that. And I think other countries have official languages and stuff. Some of them I know England has more sub languages than people realize. You know, like the Welsh, and you have some languages, some dialects over in Ireland and stuff. And for us being this country, thinking, you know, we came from the British and they speak English, we speak English. There is some more diversity over there than I think this country has anymore. And I do remember traveling through this country, cross country in '81, and seeing a lot of diversity in English across this country here, that I think now that people have started with cable and then satellite and internet and all the things today, I think the world and our country is becoming more homogeneous because of that. But still, I think there's some diversity in other countries. And like I said, him making America English the main language, I kind of like that, just because I went through a city I came from where they were trying to change the language, you know, because there was no official language. So to me, that was kind of interesting. But I'm off on a tangent. But so that was one thing he did that was interesting, that making the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. I don't know.
Well, I think a lot of those changes are kind of cosmetic or symbolic, in the sense that he's trying to, let's say, illustrate a particular point or get an easy accomplishment from the standpoint of his base. So renaming something could please his supporters within his political base, who thought that maybe the original name or the previous name was too woke or not patriotic enough. But in terms of substantive impacts, I'm less worried about that. I'm more worried about how real people are going to be affected by some of these policies. And in terms of what I foresee, as I mentioned, I think some of the most egregious and fastest moving pieces are going to be bogged down within about 40 days' time. But I also see this as an era with a lot of chaos and a lot of division that is just going to be accentuated and exacerbated. I think the American people fundamentally are tired of the division and the political chaos, and they would prefer what they would consider normalcy and stability, being able to pursue their everyday lives in peace, focus on material well-being, focus on essentially the aspects of life that are close to them. And increasingly, frustration with the two-party system will grow. I think the escalating polarization is a way in which the power elite can perpetuate this divide and rule tactic. And I think it's well known that members of the power elite on both the left and the right are actually closer to one another than their rhetoric may suggest. Even Trump himself was at one point friends with Bill and Hillary Clinton. I doubt they're friends now, but they used to be seen at the same social gatherings, and it seemed they were fairly friendly with each other. So they're all part of the same social circle. They're all part of a group of about 10,000, give or take, prominent figures within politics, media, academia, big business, think tanks, consulting firms that are all interconnected. They communicate predominantly with one another. And what they're most afraid of would be the people being tired of them as a class, of the entire system that they're overseeing. And so to prevent that, they're setting people against one another. They are inciting these intense hatreds along these partisan lines. And they are intentionally trying to get people to segregate themselves into political tribes and to be outraged at only what the left is doing or only what the right is doing, when really people should be outraged at those divide and rule tactics, what that entire ruling elite is perpetrating. I think that there was a real possibility before Trump got elected, and particularly before the pandemic, that most people would just tune out this partisan politics. Most people would just decide all of this back and forth between the Republicans and the Democrats, it's not substantive. We want to focus on living our lives. We want to focus on what could actually help, which could be technological advancements. It could be cultural creation, say using the tools that the internet offers. It could be just through connecting with other people in day-to-day life and figuring out that our similarities as human beings and our fundamental shared goals and shared values actually overshadow our differences. But I think the ruling elite has done a very effective job in keeping people divided. And the more people start tuning out partisan politics, the more intense this division becomes in an effort to get people back into the fray, because that's now the favorite tactic of the ruling elite to maintain its power. And this is where parties like the Transhumanist Party offer a real meaningful difference, because we do not endorse those divide and rule tactics. We actually want to solve problems. We actually have a constructive view of what the future should look like, and policies that harness the power of technology to actually transform people's lives for the better, to resolve controversies, to try to figure out solutions that work for as many people as possible and are consistent with their values and goals, what they see as good outcomes. Because I see a path forward where all of humanity could benefit, whether one is conventionally right-wing or left-wing or neither of the above. People could experience better lives, longer lives, healthier lives, more productive lives, lives with less strife and tension and conflict. So that's the kind of future we should be aspiring toward. And I would urge everyone viewing this to think about ways to transcend that political dichotomy, to not fall prey to the divide and rule tactics, and instead join us at transhumanist-party.org/membership. Membership is free. And take part in our conversations, take part in our efforts to advance policies that will actually benefit as many people as possible.
Well, thank you for being with us. I won't get on any tangents at the end here. I agree with everything you said, and I'm glad to have you with us again for your insightfulness and your well thought out views on everything, and I agree, and we need to work together. And like I said before, the smoke and mirrors kind of thing helps them. Like I liked your divide and rule kind of idea, and I think that's kind of it. But I think we try to aim for getting back together in 40 days and see how things are going.
Yes,
And
indeed.
the only thing I will say in ending is so far, this has not gone the way I thought it would. And, there could be something else that gets in the mix that we didn't foresee. So hopefully there isn't. But thank you very much for being with us again. And we're trying to set it up to talk again in 40 days and see how things are progressing. And thank you, as always. It's great to have you here. And it's great to know you and talk with you.
Likewise, John, live long and prosper.
Yes, live long and prosper.
Welcome to this deep dive. It's about the future of America, or at least two very different visions of it.
Okay.
You've given us some fascinating material to work with.
Yeah.
One is the United States Transhumanist Party's platform,
Okay.
and the other is a deep dive from the Heritage Foundation, which is a conservative think tank, and their take on how they would guide a potential 2025 administration.
Interesting.
It's kind of like we're watching two completely different movies about what comes next.
And they're both blockbusters in terms of ambition.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, you're going to find that they have some drastically different approaches to governing.
Right.
And they're painting pictures of America that feel miles apart.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's start with just their basic core ideologies.
Okay.
So first up is the transhumanists.
Okay.
They're all about pushing the limits of technology
Yeah.
to achieve things like radical life extension,
Okay.
individual empowerment. But here's the thing. They're not focused on traditional political power structures.
Right.
So instead of trying to gain control of Congress or the White House,
Yeah.
they've organized themselves more as like a decentralized network.
Exactly. Their goal is less about winning elections.
Right.
And more about driving technological advancement
Yeah.
as the key to unlocking human potential.
Okay, now on the other side, we've got the Heritage Foundation.
Okay.
And they represent a more traditional conservative viewpoint.
Right.
So things like limited government,
Yeah.
free markets, individual liberty, strong national defense.
Classic conservative values.
Yeah. So think of their document as like a playbook
Yeah.
for a conservative president
Okay.
that covers staffing decisions,
Right.
policy agendas across all the major government agencies.
It's a blueprint
Yeah.
to guide a 2025 administration
Exactly.
in implementing a very specific conservative vision.
Right. And so that's where this real intrigue lies.
Yeah.
Is how these groups view the role of government and technology
Yeah.
in shaping society.
Yeah.
So the transhumanists see technology as like the ultimate tool for liberation and societal transformation.
Yeah, they're talking about a future of abundance,
Right.
enhanced human capabilities, solving problems that have plagued us for centuries.
They're betting on a future where technology removes our current limitations and allows us to achieve things we can only dream of.
Yeah.
Now, the Heritage Foundation,
Yeah,
they acknowledge the importance of technology,
of course.
but they're really focused on mitigating the potential risks
Right.
that come with rapid advancement. So they're concerned about things like job displacement,
Yeah.
privacy violations,
Right.
and national security threats.
Right, especially from China.
Right. So their vision emphasizes a more cautious approach.
It's a more conservative approach,
Yeah.
rooted in a belief that change should be incremental and carefully managed. They see value in preserving existing institutions and traditions while cautiously embracing technological advancements.
Okay, so we've kind of set the stage with these two contrasting ideologies.
Yeah.
Now let's get down to the nuts and bolts of their proposals.
Okay.
Now let's start with their views on the economy.
Okay, so this is where you really see the stark difference
Yeah.
in their worldviews.
Yeah.
So the transhumanists,
Yeah.
they are aiming for something quite radical. A post-scarcity society
Okay.
powered by technological abundance.
Oh, wow.
Imagine a world where resources are plentiful
Yeah.
and poverty is essentially eradicated.
Huh.
They see policies like universal basic income as a bridge to that future,
Okay.
as a way to ensure that everyone benefits from this technological revolution.
A world without scarcity. That's a big idea.
Yeah, it's a big idea.
Now, the Heritage Foundation
Yeah.
sticks to a more traditional approach,
Right.
rooted in free markets, deregulation, and tax cuts as the primary drivers of economic growth.
They hold a deep concern about government spending and the national debt,
Right.
advocating for fiscal responsibility and a smaller role for government in the economy.
Yeah.
They believe that empowering individuals and businesses through free market principles will lead to greater prosperity for all.
And they have a rather intriguing proposal for a reciprocal trade act, which would require other countries to match U.S. tariff rates.
Interesting.
It's a bold attempt to tackle trade deficits and protect American industries.
This proposal really gets to the heart of their America First stance.
Right.
They see it as a way to level the playing field in international trade and ensure that American businesses aren't disadvantaged by what they perceive as unfair practices from other countries.
All right, next up, let's dive into how each group views this rapidly evolving landscape of technology and its impact on society.
So when it comes to technology, the Transhumanist Party is like a kid in a candy store.
Okay.
They fully embrace emerging technologies like artificial intelligence, biotechnology, nanotechnology.
Right.
To them, these aren't just advancements. They hold the keys to solving major global problems and pushing the boundaries of human potential.
So they're the early adopters.
Yes.
Eager to explore the uncharted territories of what's possible.
Yeah.
But the Heritage Foundation takes a more measured approach.
Exactly. While they don't dismiss the potential benefits, they're sounding the alarm about the potential pitfalls. They're worried about job displacement from automation, privacy violations in a data-driven world, and the risk of falling behind countries like China in the race for technological dominance.
One of the key details in the Heritage Foundation's document is their recommendation for the Department of Energy to shift its focus away from what they see as excessive green subsidies. They argue that the priority should be ensuring a reliable energy grid and supporting new technologies for natural resource development.
Okay.
They also propose policies to prevent China from acquiring U.S. companies and sensitive technologies.
These recommendations highlight their emphasis on American energy independence and their concerns about China's growing influence in strategic industries.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so let's move on to an area where we often see a clash of values. Social issues. So the Transhumanist Party leans toward a libertarian stance on social issues. Emphasizing individual freedom and choice above all else. Their focus is on expanding personal autonomy. And they see technology as a tool for achieving that. So in a way, they're looking to technology to break down traditional barriers and empower individuals to live their lives on their own terms. Now, the Heritage Foundation, they stand firm on their conservative values when it comes to things like abortion, religious liberty,
and traditional family values. And their blueprint outlines a plan to reform the Department of Health and Human Services to align with those values. Their document includes a strong critique of the CDC's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. And they propose splitting the CDC into two separate entities.
Really?
One would focus solely on scientific data gathering, while the other would handle policymaking.
Interesting.
They argue that this separation would protect scientific integrity from political influence. And then there's the proposal to prohibit Planned Parenthood from receiving Medicaid funds, a move directly aligned with their pro-life stance.
This proposal demonstrates how their social values directly translate into specific policy actions with potentially significant consequences.
So we've got these two vastly different perspectives on the role of government, the potential of technology, and the future of American society. It's like we're looking at two completely different maps for navigating the years ahead.
And what's so fascinating is these differences aren't just theoretical. They have very real implications for how we approach the challenges and opportunities of the 21st century.
Absolutely.
So before we move on to the next part of our deep dive, take a moment and consider what stands out to you from these contrasting visions. Which aspects resonate with you and which raise concerns? These are the questions that we'll be exploring in more detail as we continue this journey through these documents.
All right. Okay, so let's shift our focus now to how these ideologies kind of play out in the realm of specific government agencies and their policy proposals. So we'll start by examining the Heritage Foundation's roadmap for a potential 2025 conservative administration.
Sounds like we're about to go even deeper down the rabbit hole.
Oh, yeah.
Where do they suggest we start?
Well, they propose a pretty significant restructuring of the Department of Homeland Security.
Okay.
With a clear emphasis on bolstering border security and immigration enforcement.
That aligns perfectly with their conservative stance on immigration, doesn't it?
Exactly. They want to see a shift in resources toward operational components like ICE and customs and border protection, placing a strong emphasis on detention and deportation.
So a much tougher stance on illegal immigration.
Yeah.
With a laser focus on enforcement.
Precisely. They argue that a secure border is essential for national security and that the current system is too lax. They also advocate for streamlining the entire immigration system by consolidating it into a single agency. They think that'll improve efficiency and reduce bureaucratic hurdles.
Streamlining government bureaucracy is a common goal.
Yeah.
For those who favor limited government intervention.
Yeah.
Now, how does this compare to the Transhumanist Party's perspective on immigration?
Yeah. Their approach is much more open, emphasizing individual freedom of movement and a global perspective. So they're less concerned with strict border control and more interested in exploring how technology can be used to manage immigration more efficiently and humanely.
So less restrictive.
Yeah.
More tech-driven approach.
Exactly.
They see technology as the solution rather than enforcement as the primary response.
Right.
Let's move on to the State Department. Another area where these two groups likely have very different ideas.
Absolutely, you're right.
Yeah.
So the Heritage Foundation advocates for a return to a more traditional America First foreign policy centered on core American interests.
Yeah.
They're critical of what they see as a drift towards globalism and multilateralism, pushing for a more assertive and unilateral approach on the world stage.
Putting America's needs and interests first.
Exactly. They want the State Department to focus on strengthening alliances with countries that share their values. Particularly in the context of countering China's growing influence.
Makes sense considering their strong stance against China's ambitions.
Right. They also propose a significant restructuring of the State Department itself, streamlining its operations. Cutting its budget. Aligning with their core principle of limited government, they argue that a leaner and more focused State Department will be more effective in promoting American interests abroad.
So a leaner, meaner State Department. And this is where the contrast with the Transhumanist Party really becomes stark.
Yeah, absolutely.
They have a much more globalist outlook, right?
Absolutely. They see technology as a bridge between nations and cultures, advocating for international cooperation on technological advancements. They believe that solutions to global challenges like climate change or pandemics require a collective, collaborative effort.
A world united by technology, very different from the Heritage Foundation's America First stance.
Yes, the transhumanists envision a world where technology transcends national boundaries, leading to a more interconnected and interdependent future.
Fascinating how different these visions are.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, let's move on to defense.
All right, so the Heritage Foundation calls for a significant boost in military spending. Emphasizing the need to modernize and expand the U.S. nuclear arsenal. They perceive the world as an increasingly dangerous place, especially with the rise of China and Russia, and believe that a strong military is absolutely essential to deterring aggression and protecting American interests.
Classic peace through strength argument.
Exactly. They argue that projecting weakness invites aggression and that America must maintain a dominant military force to defend its interests and protect its allies.
Now I imagine the Transhumanist Party, while not advocating for disarmament, doesn't necessarily view military might as the primary solution to international conflict.
You're right. They believe that technology can be a powerful tool for de-escalation and conflict resolution. So they're more interested in exploring how technology can reduce the need for traditional warfare, promoting nonviolent solutions to international disputes.
So a more pacifist approach with technology playing a key role in creating a more peaceful world?
Yeah.
That sounds pretty idealistic.
Yes.
But also kind of hopeful.
Yeah.
Okay, let's shift our focus to domestic policy, starting with education.
All right, so the Heritage Foundation takes aim at the Department of Education, calling for a significant downsizing. They are critical of what they see as federal overreach in education, advocating for a return to local control, parental choice.
Less government, more power to parents and communities.
Exactly.
A classic conservative stance.
They're strong proponents of school choice.
Charter schools?
Yeah.
Arguing that parents should have more control over their children's education.
Now, how does this compare to the Transhumanist Party's views on education?
They also support educational freedom and innovation. But their focus is different.
Okay.
They're all about leveraging technology to personalize learning.
Right.
Expand access to educational resources, and prepare students for a future shaped by rapid technological advancement.
So both groups support a level of educational freedom.
Yes.
But with different approaches. The Heritage Foundation focuses on reducing government control, while the transhumanists focus on harnessing technology to improve the educational experience.
Exactly. It's another example of how their differing ideologies lead them to advocate for distinct approaches to achieving similar goals.
Okay, let's move on to another critical area.
Okay.
Healthcare.
So the Heritage Foundation calls for a full repeal of the Affordable Care Act.
Advocating for its replacement with a market-based system that emphasizes individual choice and competition.
Less government involvement, more free market principles.
Precisely.
In line with their overall philosophy.
They believe that the Affordable Care Act is too bureaucratic and intrusive, arguing that it has driven up costs and reduced patient choice. They support policies like health savings accounts and allowing insurance companies to sell plans across state lines, believing that increased competition will lower costs and improve quality.
Now, what about the Transhumanist Party? How do they view the healthcare system?
They're also deeply interested in healthcare. But their focus is different. They see technology as the key to revolutionizing healthcare, making it more personalized, preventative, and effective. They envision a future where technology extends lifespans, improves health outcomes, and empowers individuals to take control of their own health.
So both groups prioritize individual choice and access to quality healthcare. But through different means. The Heritage Foundation wants to achieve this through free market principles, while the transhumanists see technology as the driving force for positive change.
It highlights how these ideological differences manifest in very different policy proposals, even when the ultimate goals might seem similar.
Okay, let's move on to an issue that's increasingly at the forefront of public debate. The environment.
Okay, so the Heritage Foundation expresses skepticism about climate change. And strongly opposes government regulations aimed at reducing carbon emissions.
So they favor a less interventionist approach.
Yes, they advocate for a more free market approach to environmental issues, believing that innovation and technological advancements driven by private enterprise will provide solutions to environmental challenges without the need for heavy-handed government regulations.
And what about the Transhumanist Party? Where do they stand on environmental concerns?
They acknowledge the importance of environmental sustainability, but their focus is on using technology to mitigate environmental damage and create a more sustainable future. They see technology as a powerful tool for addressing environmental challenges and are open to exploring radical solutions that might be dismissed by more traditional environmental groups.
So once again, we see technology playing a central role in their vision.
It is.
It's interesting how these groups diverge on the role of government regulation in addressing environmental concerns. Really reflects their fundamentally different views on the role of government in society as a whole.
It does.
Okay, let's wrap up this section with a look at their proposals for the Justice Department.
Okay, so the Heritage Foundation is highly critical of what they see as the politicization of the Justice Department. Under previous administrations, they argue that it has been used as a weapon against political opponents and has strayed from its core mission of upholding the rule of law in a fair and impartial manner.
So they're calling for a depoliticized Justice Department that focuses solely on enforcing the law without bias.
Exactly. They want to see a return to traditional legal principles, ensuring that the Justice Department operates independently and resists any attempts to use it for partisan political gain.
Okay, now how does the Transhumanist Party view the justice system?
Yeah.
I imagine they might have a more forward-looking perspective, considering their focus on technology and its potential impact on society.
You're right. They're less concerned with the political dynamics of the Justice Department and more interested in ensuring that laws and regulations keep pace with rapid technological advancements.
Okay.
They advocate for a more flexible and adaptive legal framework that can accommodate the transformative potential of emerging technologies.
Okay, so we've explored a range of agency-specific proposals from the Heritage Foundation, from Homeland Security, to the environment and the justice system. And it's clear that their recommendations consistently reflect their core values of limited government, free markets, individual liberty, and a strong national defense.
They advocate for reducing the size and scope of government, empowering individuals and businesses, and taking a more assertive stance on the world stage. It's a clear and consistent vision for how they believe America should be governed.
And it stands in stark contrast to the Transhumanist Party's vision, which embraces technological disruption and societal transformation, often advocating for a more global perspective.
It's a reminder that there are vastly different views on what constitutes progress and how best to achieve it.
Okay, so before we move on to the final part of our deep dive, let's take a step back and consider what all of this means for the average American.
Okay.
So these contrasting visions have real-world implications for people's everyday lives.
They impact everything, from healthcare and education to the economy and the environment.
Yes.
The choices we make as a society will determine which path we take and what kind of future we create.
Absolutely.
It's not just about abstract political ideologies. It's about the lives and well-being of real people.
It's a powerful reminder that politics isn't just a game played by elites. It has tangible consequences for all of us.
It does.
Okay, so let's talk about something that affects every single one of us, money.
Okay.
Specifically, how these two groups view taxes, financial regulations, and the future of the dollar itself.
Okay, so the Heritage Foundation lays out a very clear, classically conservative approach. Lower taxes, fewer regulations, and a stable, predictable monetary policy.
Essentially, they want to see individuals and businesses keep more of their hard-earned money and have more control over how they spend and invest it.
Exactly. Their core belief is that reducing the tax burden and minimizing government interference in the market will unleash economic growth and lead to greater prosperity for everyone.
Sounds good in theory. But where does the Transhumanist Party stand on all of this? They don't seem like the type to get bogged down in traditional economic debates.
You're right. Their focus is much more long-term.
Okay.
And you could say more radical. They're less concerned with tweaking the existing system and more interested in building a future where technology renders many of these economic concerns obsolete.
So while the Heritage Foundation is focused on improving the current system, the transhumanists are looking beyond it entirely.
Exactly. They envision a world of technological abundance where resources are plentiful and the need for traditional economic models is diminished. It's a fascinating, albeit ambitious, vision.
Okay, so let's bring it back to the present for a moment and dive into some specifics.
All right.
So the Heritage Foundation is calling for a major overhaul of the U.S. tax code. Simplifying it and lowering rates across the board.
They aim to make the system fairer, more transparent, and less burdensome for both individuals and businesses. They believe that simplifying the tax code will reduce compliance costs and make it easier for everyone to understand their tax obligations.
Less paperwork, less confusion. Always a good thing.
They argue that a simpler, fairer tax system benefits everyone in the long run.
Now let's talk about financial regulations, an area that's always sparked intense debate.
So the Heritage Foundation takes a very clear stance. They want to roll back many of the regulations put in place after the 2008 financial crisis. They believe that these regulations, while well-intentioned, have actually stifled lending, innovation, and economic growth by placing unnecessary burdens on businesses. especially smaller ones.
So less red tape, more freedom for businesses to operate.
Yes.
A classic deregulatory approach.
They argue that the free market is ultimately the best regulator.
Right.
And that excessive government intervention often does more harm than good.
Now let's talk about the big one.
Okay.
The future of the dollar itself.
Okay.
The Heritage Foundation expresses deep concerns about inflation and the Federal Reserve's monetary policy.
Right.
They argue that the Federal Reserve's actions in recent years, such as quantitative easing and low interest rates, have contributed to rising inflation and undermine the value of the dollar. They advocate for a more stable and predictable monetary policy, one that focuses on maintaining price stability and protecting the purchasing power of the currency. Essentially, they want to see a return to sound money, keeping prices in check, protecting the value of your savings.
They believe that a stable dollar is crucial for long-term economic health, and that the Federal Reserve needs to be more accountable and transparent in its actions.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
Taxes, regulations, and the future of the dollar.
Yeah.
Now, before we wrap up this deep dive, I think it's important to acknowledge that while these economic policies championed by the Heritage Foundation might sound appealing, there are potential downsides to consider.
Absolutely, you're right.
So while lower taxes and fewer regulations can certainly stimulate economic activity in the short term, they can also lead to increased inequality, a reduction in government services, and potentially even greater financial instability, if not managed carefully.
Exactly. So it's a complex balancing act.
There are no easy answers or simple solutions when it comes to economic policy. It's all about finding the right mix of policies to promote sustainable growth, stability, and prosperity for all.
Absolutely.
So as we come to the end of our exploration of these contrasting visions, I want to leave you with this question.
Sure.
Which vision of America's future resonates more with you?
Yeah.
And why? Is it the Transhumanist Party's pursuit of radical technological advancement and a world transformed by abundance? Or the Heritage Foundation's call for limited government free markets and a return to what they consider traditional values?
These documents offer just a glimpse into two possible paths forward, but there are countless other perspectives and ideas shaping the America of tomorrow.
It's up to all of us to stay informed, engage in thoughtful debate, and participate in shaping the future we want to see. That's what makes these deep dives so fascinating.
Absolutely.
They challenge us to think critically and engage with the forces shaping our world.
Thanks for joining us on this journey.
Keep those brains buzzing.